Hello and welcome guys to another Hotlap and track guide, and today we have the GT4s at Daytona for the iRacing Week 4 schedule. So let's have a look at the Hotlap and then we'll have a look at the guide. So now that we've had a look at the Hotlap, let's have a look at the guide. So for the first corner, our turn-in reference and our braking marker is this board here. So you see there's a board here with an arrow to the left, and it's the board just before that. It's usually lit up green, and we brake and we turn in just as we approach that board on the right hand side. So getting onto the brakes, a gentle turn in, and we're aiming to be as close to this white line on the entry as possible to open up the entry of the corner. And we want to turn in for the left just before we get to this concrete on the right hand side. So just before we get to that line of concrete, we want to turn into the right hander, and we want to apex after this tyre wall on the left hand side for the pit exit. Be careful not to put the front left onto the grass because it's cambered down to the left, so you can get the left front stuck there and it'll just unsettle the car. Unwind the steering wheel, get onto the power, and we want to try and put as little steering input as possible for this right and then left. We can put the front right onto the inside of this curb and it'll help us hook around. Be careful though, because sometimes like here it does unsettle the car a little bit, so it may be better to go around it, but just see how the track condition is. Sometimes there isn't enough grip and you actually need to do that to hook it round the corner. Now going into the hairpin, we're looking for these three poles and we're braking as we get to the first pole on the left hand side. So as we get to that first pole, we're going to get onto the brakes, down into second gear, and we want a really late apex for this hairpin. So we want to apex over here on this yellow curb. There is a Rolex advertising board on the inside that you can use as a reference, but unless you have triple monitors, you're not going to be able to see that. So just apex as late as possible really for this hairpin. Get onto the power and unwind the steering wheel. And there's an alternate course on the left here that you'll notice. And we can go over the white line and actually use that to get onto the power and open up the exit. If you go past that white line, it won't trigger the track limits. And now for this high-speed left-hander, we want to turn in around about this point that this white line changes from straight to going right slightly. That point where it changes, we turn in around about there into the left-hander. We want to use a little bit of this yellow curb to help us hook round the corner. It's going to bump a little bit, but as long as we exit over to the left of the track, then we can open up this upcoming right-hander. Getting onto the brakes, just around about where this escape road starts, or this one starts. They're about the same place, whichever is easier for you to use as a reference. We want to get on the brakes around about that point. Down into second gear, and we want to make sure we stay on the left side of this black line of tar initially to open up the entry as much as possible. And then we're aiming to apex. There's a very dark section on the curbing. You'll notice here on this yellow curb, it goes really black, and we want to use that as sort of our apex reference. As you see here, it goes really black here from all the tire marks. We want to use that as our apex reference, and at that point we want to get onto the power, unwind the steering wheel. We can use a little bit of this exit curbing if we need to on the exit there. There's some yellow curbing, it's quite flat, so you can use that if you need to. Now if we're going on this left-hander, we are about to go up onto the oval, so we really want to prioritise our exit and carry as much momentum as possible. So to open up the corner, we want to be over to the right and getting on the brakes as we cross this line for the alternate course on the right hand side. Braking down the gears, down into second gear, turning in just after that yellow curb on the right hand side disappears, and we want to use as much of this yellow curb on the left as possible without triggering the track limits. We can actually go on the gravel a little bit and then get on the power just after we cross that curbing. Unwind the steering wheel, don't let it go over to the right because you're just going to make the track longer than you need to make it. So bring it back over to the left, and we want to aim for this point here. So this white line is going left and then it joins the oval, and that point over there is about where we want to then get onto the oval. So use that as a reference, get up onto the oval, and then drive as close to this yellow line as possible up to the chicane. So now that we're going into the chicane, we're looking for the number 2 board on the right hand side, and we're using that as our braking reference, and then we turn in as we get to the number 1 board. So as we get to the number 1 board, we're turning into the corner, into third gear, trailing off the brakes and putting the front left in this gap between the second sausage curb and the blue and yellow curbing. So put the front left in that gap, trailing the brakes just about 10%, and then again we're putting the front right in this gap between the two curbings, that sausage curb and the blue and yellow curbing. Off the brakes and just let it coast now through the middle part of the chicane, and then we get on the power just as the blue and yellow curbing disappears underneath the car. So as you see, just before that disappears, we get onto the power. It's around about halfway between the two curbs, whichever is easier for you to use as a reference, but about halfway through the chicane we should be getting back onto the power. And then we want to put the front right around about here between the sausage curbs and the blue and yellow curbing. But then for the second part of the chicane, because we're full throttle, we can actually take some of this anti-cut curbing on the inside. And as you see, the GT4 just destroys that curb. It's absolutely no problem over it. Just be careful for track limits, obviously, but the suspension handles that curbs really nicely compared to the GT3s and the LMP2. But that is it for the guide. For the last section, you just drive as close to that yellow line as possible, all the way to the flag. But as always guys, thank you very much for watching, hope you enjoyed, and see you again next time.